Greetings, family. This is Kyle Dixon, co-founder of Precise Minds Filmworks, educator for 20 plus years, cultural enthusiast.
And I'm Kayode Bentley, president and founder of 4T's Teaching Teens to Think, whose mission is to help inner city youth identify their inherent skill sets in order to complete their education, establish a career, and ultimately start a business, if they choose to. Professor at Fordham University, where I teach students who are pursuing their master's degree in social justice.
And with that said, welcome to the Grand Rising Collective, a podcast whose purpose is to cultivate greatness and excellence within ourselves and our communities. The name itself is from the morning greeting of Grand Rising, which we interpret as starting off the day with a greatness mindset so that we are able to rise to the occasion of whatever obstacles and challenges we may face.
And that's why we focus on engagement, relevant information, and empowerment for people in our communities who want to be and do better in their daily lives.
Welcome to the Grand Rising Collective. Greetings, family. Welcome for another episode of the Grand Rising Collective podcast. Welcome back. All right. We have a special guest for you all today. And we have a lot of info to share with you all. I mean, just a lot of wealth of info and just empowerment strategies and tactics for you to take and apply. But before we go into that, for those who may be new to the platform, be new to the show, let me introduce myself first. My name is Kyle Dixon. I'm one of your co-hosts, along with my other co-host, Kayode Bentley. You know, my podcast in crime, or podcaster in cinema online, and the platform Grand Rise Collective Podcast for you all who are not familiar. It is a podcast to empower, engage, and inform you towards your excellent selves. We chose the title Grand Rise Collective so that way you could rise to the occasion of a lot of your obstacles, challenges, and difficulties. So we know we all have those. So a lot of the people that we have on our platform are people who are experts, who have these strategies that not only give you insight, but to empower you to be your best and excellent self. My brother Kayode, how you doing today, sir?
Very well, sir. Thank you so much. And I forgot to mention earlier, I'm doing the live stream as well with the youth that I have in my partnership with the Boys and Girls Club. So if you see me talking to the side, I'm not going crazy. Don't worry about it. I'm just proud myself of you talking to the young people, because I'm sure that they'll have a lot of questions that they would like to ask you, Ms. Blakely, especially since you're familiar with the youth demographic. Thank you so much, Kyle, for the introduction. My name is Kayode Bentley. As Kyle said, he put it so eloquently as he always does, what we're here at the Grand Rising Collective to do. My aspect, or how can I say, my contribution is to help share the information, share the wealth to us in the neighborhood, as it's so-called claimed a community, but it's really not a community. But y'all know me, y'all know what I mean by that definition. But I'm just happy to be here. I'm happy to add, whatever I can add to the community, and I'm looking forward to this discussion with Miss Blakely. So I'm ready to go, Kyle. Thank you so much, brother. Appreciate you as always.
Indeed. And yes, you are. Like I said, we have a special guest today, Miss Glenda Blakely. Thank you for sharing your time with us today. She has so much to offer. It's a lot to say, but she's a career transition guru. She's an educator, a professional, coordinator. I mean, this person here has a lot, has done a lot, and has a lot to share with us today. So I don't want to ruin it at all. I want her to be able to just explain to y'all who she is, because I want to give her definitely that platform to talk, because we definitely have a heavyweight with us today, right? For sure. Ms. Blakely, welcome today. Thank you for your time for us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
I just want to introduce myself to everybody that's on the session today. I am a career transition guru who works with everybody from entry level to high school students up to senior executives. I also facilitate and design lots of workshops around career transition issues. This is how I met Kyle in 2016 at a workshop at CUNY's Research Foundation. I did 2 sessions around career transition there. I also have worked with the largest outplacement firms in New York and New Jersey around massive layoffs and people being laid off and having to reinvent themselves. I'm also an experiential educator at one of the CUNY colleges where I work with students in graphic design, 3D animation, web design, and a couple of other more creative industries like videography, photography, and things like that. So I work with a lot of creative types. I often speak before a number of groups, and I'm happy to always do that because I think information is really important. When I do speak, I tend to get the rooming fully engaged, and they have lots of questions afterwards. Thus, that's how I ended up here today with Kyle. I hold a master's from Michigan State University, which is one of the Big Ten schools. And I also have an undergrad degree from an historically Black college, which is Wilberforce University, which is outside of Dayton, Ohio. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Nice. Nice. And just for the record, Ms. Blakely, whenever we shout out HBCUs, I don't want to interrupt. I'll say, holla. You know,
for everybody that doesn't know what HBCUs are, will you explain to them? Because we abbreviate things and we assume that everybody knows, and not everybody knows.
This is true. So right. So HBCUs family stand for historically Black colleges and universities. So the illustrious institutions of grandeur that have facilitated a lot of our Black professionals in the world, namely myself and Ms. Blakely. Again, hence why I have the shirt on today, a different bulldog, a shirt I created that is representative of Fisk University. I'm a Fisk University graduate. So Wilberforce, to give you a little backstory real quick, Wilberforce University is the first Black owned and operated historically Black college in the nation. All right. So I think Cheyney's the first, right? I think 1837. But Wilberforce is the first Black owned and operated. All right. So we coming from some very historical places here. All right. Fisk, my school, 1866. Right. Nice. So, okay. All right. So let's get into it. So Ms. Blakely, I want to start the question. So with you going to a HBCU, getting your college education at these various institutions, Michigan State, what led you into like education? What led you? Because in reference of even my story, I was not initially wanting to be a teacher, but I ended up being a teacher and I love it, an educator. But what led you into the profession of like education and careers?
So Wilberforce had what they call a cooperative education program, which is now known as internships and experiential learning. And I actually did a couple of co-ops as a recruiter for the college, recruiting high school students who were considering going to college. So that led to my interest in student affairs, which is the umbrella at colleges where you get all of your support services, career counseling, coaching, you name it, you can find it there. They help you with academic advising. So my first job after I graduated from Wilberforce, after having accrued a year and a half of work experience, I'd done some social work, found out I like helping people, but not necessarily helping them when they're destitute. So I decided to transfer those skills to a college setting. And my first job was, I always said I wanted to work at UC Berkeley. So I worked at UC Berkeley in the Afro-American Studies department, and I was an academic advisor and counselor there for 4 years. And then I made sure I was networking on campus, called in some favors, was referred out to PSE&G, which is a public utility in San Francisco. And I just transferred the skills to become a college recruiter for the gas company. And I had a focus on recruiting minority students. So I went to Howard University. I went to all the Black colleges because they didn't have anybody else on the team that looked like the students. So I would always go and do the recruiting. I did that for several years. And then I moved back to the East Coast and I continued to work in human resources. And I always worked in an area where I had multiple locations, meaning I was in the field. I would have a headquarters, but I would have multiple locations. So I did that for several years. I always wanted to learn labor relations. So I got labor relations under my belt as a skill set. And then I began to experiencing laying off people. So as an HR professional, you always have to lay people off. And then I got laid off a few times. So I thought maybe this is, it's time to do something else. And I pivoted and transferred those skills to the outplacement management consulting firms of Wright Management and Lee Hecht Harrison. They are now owned by different entities, but they're the big outplacement firms here on the East Coast. And I work with everybody imaginable, all kinds of industries, very senior people, people who worked there all their lives. And of course, what would happen is they show up one day at the office and they say, today is your last day, gather your things and leave now. And then I would get them. And then, of course, they'd be kind of upset and we'd have to work with them to help them get resumes, interviews. They'd come to the workshops, one-on-one counseling. And then I transitioned into education. And I started out at a fashion school in New York City, which I still teach at. It's a high-end fashion school. And I've been networking with people all along, and they've been coming to my presentations. And someone recommended me for the CUNY job, who had seen me present before. And I've been with CUNY now close to 8 years, doing the internships and the advisement, as well as working with all these different kinds of students, and most of which are it's a very diverse crowd, meaning that, you have all kinds. For some students, it's their first time going to college. So we work on everything imaginable about what it takes to realize your goals. You can have lofty goals, but you have to put the work in. So I spend time with students around in my class. I have 2 classes. It's called Professional Development and Career Planning. And we talk about what's considered professional, what's not. We do your typical resume and interviewing, but now interviewing has changed to virtual. So now we're covering that. We cover social media. And I have them look at scenarios where people have gotten fired for what they've posted. And people are still posting things that are a little bit over the top. And some of the students seem to think that's okay. I explain to them that, because you think it doesn't mean you should say it.
Right.
And I also have them create LinkedIn profiles, which I edit pretty carefully. When we were in class, I would pull them up in class so people could see. And I'd say, so what's wrong with this particular profile? We also cover all the other social media platforms because my students are on most everything that's out there. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. You can actually get jobs from all these sites, but you have to be consistent in your message. And you definitely need to be careful about what you post. So we cover that. And then the big thing is students will say, oh, I want to make $70,000. And they really have no clue about what that's all about. So I spend time with them on helping them understand what the market will bear. They have to research jobs other than in New York City. Get them to understand geographical differentials, meaning if you work in LA versus South Carolina, your pay is going to be different. We talk about what the minimum wage is in New York City. And I tell students, if you need to be paid to internship, do not search for non-paying internships, only search for paid internships. Then I direct them to the right sites to do that. Do cover letters, but I also have students send a thank you note to someone who's been very helpful to them because people don't practice good etiquette. And in most cases, when I've done college relations, I could have interviewed 14 students during my entire day. And the only one that sent the thank you note is the one that I actually offered the job because they displayed some follow-up, follow-through, and professionalism. So students still get stuck. They'll create a note about a job, and I clearly say it must be somebody who's been helpful to you over the last 12 months. And yes, I ask them to actually send the note. And it's interesting the kind of responses students get back to me and say they were shocked. I say to them, hey, I'd love to get a thank you note instead of a bill. So let's practice that on an ongoing level. Yeah. So we cover lots of things, informational interviews. I know students worry a lot about, why would they talk to me? What can I offer? If you frame it correctly, people are willing to talk to you about anything. So if you think you want to be a 2 or 3D animator, you need to find some and reach out to them. And now, of course, you're doing things virtually.
Right.
So that means you need to have the right equipment. You need to be set up. And you need to say, when you say you're going to be on time, make sure you ask good questions. But never really ask for a job straight up because you put people you put them in a box and you should be saying, I'm seeking information. If you are talking to someone that has a need that you might be able to help, you can also offer up, hey, I checked your website out. I know you're just starting. I have some tips for you. I'm willing to help you with that. If you actually give as much as you ask for, it all comes full circle. Right. So that's the other thing I ask students to do is make sure when they're asking for help to also offer up something. But you need to be carefully listening and actively watching to know what that might be. So when they leave my class, I tell them, you're ready. They say, we hear it's a good class, but it's hard. I said, no, I'm giving you all the skills you need to go through life, because if you live long enough, you'll be laid off. Okay. And when we talk about networking, they'll say, I don't know anybody. I said, oh, please. Here's the reason I say that. I said, I'm going to give some examples. So when you really want something badly, you move heaven and earth. So if your favorite football team is coming to town to play and tickets are sold out, you'll work the phones until you find a ticket.
That's right.
I said, and women are absolutely. And I always say, and women, oh, who did your hair? Who did your nails? I said, we network all the time.
All the time.
But we need to convert that into helping us get further in our career. And I say to them, the fear of rejection is real, but what's the worst thing that could happen? They could say no, or they can say, I'm glad to help. But the big thing that I feel that really needs to happen after you've met with someone, they've been helpful to you, is to come back full circle and say to them, I met with Kyle, or I met with Glenda, and here's what happened. What people tend to do is gather the information, make the connection, and never circle back to the originator, so that you would then know where they are should you hear of something else. So I'm a big networker. I talk to anybody about anything. On my LinkedIn, I have lots of different connections. I don't put myself in a box and only talk to people that do what I do, because if somebody needs a resource, I can drill down into my connections and refer them to someone. So I teach people the art of being proactive, and also using your connections, and also offering up something so that people see you as a resource, not necessarily somebody who's always looking for something. That's a long answer, but that's it.
That's a thorough answer. That's it. I tell family. What I tell, look, Kayode and I, when we have professionals come to this platform, we're not playing games here. You know what I'm saying? I told you we're not playing games. I'm sorry, Kayode. I just had to.
No, that's fine. Actually, you just gave a workshop right there. Actually.
Right.
Just so you know. I speak with young people all the time, and what you just mentioned, I'm gonna work backwards in my questioning, Cal. So just be patient.
Indeed.
It was very interesting how you said that other students who didn't attend your class would speak to you or bring up the fact that your class is difficult, when in fact all you're doing is breaking down the basics on what they need to do in developing a network, communication. I mean, that's what the workforce is.
Right.
And to hear the generation say that your class is hard for just giving them the reality of just the basics was very interesting. And I'm glad you mentioned that. The other thing I wanted to add is I'm a bounce all over. That was just a statement I wanted to add. But here's my question. It was mentioned to me, the information that Kyle gave me, is that you're an experimental educator. Can you elaborate on that? What does that mean?
That means you work with students to get credit-bearing internships, meaning they get credit for an internship, and it's considered academic credit. So it counts towards their GPA. It's not a free withall. You actually have to do quite a bit of work, meaning you have to write papers, you have to present biweekly reports. You can't just show up. You have to be participate the previous semester to understand what's expected of you, because we no longer can make a phone call to say, can you take Glenda on this internship? You must actually have a portfolio, a resume, and you must be able to interview and write a good cover letter. And that's a hiccup for a lot of students. Tenses are incorrect. Oh, I don't have a portfolio. Oh, I don't have an experience. And I know for a fact they've been working with the college for 2 years, and they've done projects in class. They've done freelance assignments. And by the way, I tell them to stop freelancing so much and start getting paid, because then your work, the value goes up. And I explain to them how they can create where they have empty space and say they have no experience. I said, oh, yes, you have experience. You've either volunteered somewhere, you've done freelance, you've had school projects. So that's where you fill in that hole where you may not have done an actual internship. You have to talk about something, right? You cannot just hope for the best. And I always say to them, please don't list all your Home Depot jobs when you tell me you want to be an animator. And that's what I will get. And I say, that's nothing to take away from your Home Depot jobs. I understand that you're financing your education, but that should be at the bottom. You should be leading in with the upper third of your document showing why they should take a chance on you. I also invite students back who've been in my classes the previous years, and especially the students have gone on to some of the places where they want to work. I have the students tell the whole story, how they were in the class, what gave them headaches, what they may be complaining about now, where they are, So every semester I pick, and they're doing extremely well. Now I have another peer. He picks the ones who tripped up and fell a few times. He likes them to tell the negative. I tend to accentuate the positives, and then I always say to them, what's the lesson learned and what advice do you have for them? So every semester I have somebody come in.
Awesome. I just want to give a shout out to Yara Coburn, Kenta Tahir, and Tonette Delk. Thank you for joining the show. We hope this is very informative. All right, so Ms. Blakely, so that's the new title that they're giving now, as far as education, experiential learning.
Experiential learning.
Learning. Okay, experiential. Got you. Okay, and you broke it down exactly to the particulars. Thank you so much for that. Okay, the final question, Kyle, and I'll hand it over back to you. It's funny that you mentioned these particulars, the basics, which is awesome. One of the things that I try and teach the students that I work with is inherent skill set. So inherent skill set meaning what they do naturally, because I know that a lot of students are they're following the old script, which is go to school, get a good education, get a good job,
and do exactly what the instructor says. Don't think outside the box.
Exactly, right? And part of their criteria in regards to a good school is particularly higher education in college. It's a prestigious school, right? And we know prestigious schools, tuition rates are through the roof. It's a different environment that they're not used to, what have you. And the statistics prove, data, facts, and statistics prove that half of them don't even complete their college education if they get in there. They make it there for a year, probably a year and a half or 2 years, and then they end up dropping out. And they still got a bill, they got to pay salary, whatever the case may be. My question is, where do you see inherent skill sets in your experiential, right? Exponential, the category that you're in regards to teaching. Where do you see that fit in regards to kind of giving youth insight? For me in particular, is inner city youth insight on what they do naturally and tying that into their education as well as their higher education to help them.
Okay, so that's a great question, because every semester I can count how many students that actually follow the instructions, follow through, listen well, read everything, ask questions if they don't understand. And I need to see more of that, because it's kind of like you put together the courses and they'll say what's due, and it's right there in front of them. So for inherent skills, like if students say, I've had a few students say, oh, I did a mural and it's on the subway stop on Delancey Street. I say, is that in your resume? Well, no. I say, well, why is that? Oh, I don't know. So I'll say, well, okay, when you do your resume draft, I'm going to be looking for that. And they're a little stunned that I take good notes. And so when the resume comes up, I write back and say, so what happened to the mural on Delancey Street? So they'll say, Professor, how do you remember that? Active listening is a thing that's missing.
Yes.
I can't even talk about, that's a whole nother kind of conversation, because people are so busy wanting immediate gratification that they really don't hear what's being said and then, take it in and pause and respond. So I'm very big on active listening. And I also tell them in my class, the reason you have problems with this class is you're used to the professors dictating exactly what you must do. You do that, you get an A, and you never spoke, you never said a word. Now I'm asking you to talk. I'm asking you to engage. I'm giving you options when you do your portfolio. You got all these different ways you can give it to me, because we have all these different skill sets in this department. I said, and every semester students will say, Professor, can you look at my work? My answer is no, because you need to pick your best work. You need to be able to talk about it. I don't talk the way you talk. So active listening is really important. Self-confidence, just stepping off the cliff and doing it rather than just standing still saying, well, I like to be by myself and I like to be alone and like to play games. I said, that's all well and good. But in the real world, everybody has to collaborate with somebody on something. I said, so here's what I'm going to say to you. If you want to be the next Spike Lee, I said, how long has he been making movies? 100 years. And he did not win an Oscar until a couple of years ago because he collaborated with others.
Okay. Yes.
So I say to them, your colleagues in your classes that you've had over the last 2 years, I said, I will get at the end of each semester, hey, professor, I'm trying to reach Kyle. Can you give me his email? And I have to write back and say no, because that's personal information. You had the opportunity when you were in the class. So I'm always talking about or are you connecting with your peers? You don't have to like all of them. You don't have to connect with everyone. And then I use the analogy, we all have relatives we don't like, but we just kind of grin and bear it and we do what we have to do. So I say to them, you want to seize the opportunity before you need it, because eventually you're going to need it, right? And somebody may ask you to do a project and you can't do it, but you know somebody from your class who could, but you have no way of contacting them now. So being curious, always talking to people, expanding your network, and not staying inside of your little box. All these things will help you well down the road.
Oof. And I want to give a quick shout out. I got to post it up. Quick shout out to Tonette, I love, shout out to Jackson State, and I want to post that. Thank you, Tonette, another HBCU in the house. And also I do have a shirt with Jackson State on it. We'll talk about that later. But I'm glad she posted. I'm glad we talked about that earlier, because this ties into the whole HBCU dynamic. HBCUs are all about networking. That's one thing they told us when we got to school was you better network. And I have friends and colleagues in my own graduating class, and even some classes slightly before me and slightly after me, where we've networked dentists, doctors, architects, IT, pharmacy, just all these different avenues and aspects of industry. And college is the best place for you to network. I mean, I can't, you'll never be around those type of people in that tight of confines or that consistency of environment in your lifetime. So that's one thing they told us when we first got to college, was you better talk to your peers and network and create those family relationships. You got to create those relationships. And what Ms. Blakely is talking about is right on time with that. Even with myself and Kayode, we were connected through a mutual friend. Relationships, you know what I'm saying? So you just tie in right there, Ms. Blakely. So I want to go into the whole power of networking. They say your network is your net worth, right? And how you leverage that, right? People may look at it as like a dirty thing, or people look at networking as dirty, but how can we begin to gain the skills of networking? You mentioned some of it already, but how can we take that and also realize what we have to offer? Because I think a lot of times with students, like you were just mentioning, they have the skills, but they're afraid or hesitant to talk about themselves in a positive manner. So how can they begin to navigate that?
So I'm going to go back to my active listening first. Be curious about people. Listen to what they are all about. Ask questions. Take some notes, right? And then when they say, so what's your story? This is where your pitch comes in, your 30-second pitch. Not I'm 18 years old and I live in the Bronx and my mother does it's none of that. It's kind of like, for the last 2 summers, I've been working with a Better Chance program. I'm very skilled and self-taught in coding. My peers will tell you that I work hard, but I bring people together. You want to be able to kind of give them something. I tell them it should roll off your mouth like when you get up every morning to brush your teeth and go about your routine. It should be a natural kind of a flow. It shouldn't be so rehearsed that it sounds like it's formal. And then actively listen to the person. And then, I always say this to people. When I meet people, I always say, and I will tell you this. I say, okay, if they ask me to do something, I say, you know what? I have one request. If it works for you and you're pleased, I'd love a LinkedIn recommendation. I have no shame in asking for that. Okay. And I have none, because you need to have 3 on your profile to be considered complete. Clearly, I have more than that, but I'm documenting having someone say they've observed me and they can speak to my skill sets. I often have some students also to come up with 6 to 8 people that can say they're the best thing since sliced bread. That's references. And then I even give them how I want it. Years known, relationship, phone number, how they want to be reached. I lay it all out for them, because I said somebody's going to eventually ask. And I get these emails the night before. Hey, professor, I'll understand if you can't do this, but can you give me a reference? And I say, you want more than 3 because you don't want to use the same person over and over again. And if the person says to you, what would you like for me to say? Don't say, oh my God, aren't they writing it? Use that as an opportunity to zero in on what you want them to speak to, because all your references should be different, should highlight you in a different light. You don't want everybody saying, oh, she was a good student. And I tell the students, I've only written 5 recommendations in 8 years. I said, I'm very selective. Okay. So I tell them, pick people that really can jump off the page when they're talking about you, because nothing's worse than a boring recommendation.
Wow.
It's really, it's serious. So this whole networking thing. So people will tell you, if somebody says something to me and I know a resource, I'll just send it to them. That's how I operate. I'm always reading a lot, and I read a lot of things. So if something comes up, and I always tell people, I don't know it all, but I know how to go find it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I go find it, and then I share it accordingly. I think people appreciate that because most people, you don't hear from them until they need something. And the next question would be, I don't know what to say, Professor. I haven't talked to them in 2 years. I said, well, start out with how are you doing and how are you holding up with the pandemic? I said, make it about them before you start it about you, right? And actively listen to what they're saying. And then when they say, what's new with you? Please don't start out with, I'm looking for a job. Do you know anybody? I said, that's the kiss of death. I tell them you need to say something along the lines of, I was doing this for the last 2 years and I'm transitioning out right now and I'm looking to do blah, blah, blah. Who might be helpful for me to talk to in your network? You notice I never said nothing about, do you have a job for me?
Mm-hmm.
We skip from the beginning to the end. We exclude the middle.
Right.
And the middle is so important. Yeah. So I also say have different age levels in your network. Have people, don't just shoot for the stars, shoot for the up and coming people. Because one day they're going to be hot and famous and you're going to be saying, I knew them when, right? Mm-hmm. When they have that big gallery showing, you'll get your ticket and it won't be so awkward because you've been with them every step of the way. So faculty, students also some of them will go directly to their professors and that's the only reference they know. They have all these professors and I say, hey, okay, you need to have a mix, right? And they said, but I don't know anybody. I said, yeah, but your resume said you did a freelance project. Oh, I can include that? And I said, and how about all this volunteer work you've been doing? And they're using your publications for their communications. Come on now. So I can help them extract when they say it's not that. I said, no, but that's not true because I looked at the document. So getting them to kind of see the full picture and how to utilize everything to their betterment is sort of, people just kind of like, I haven't done this before, therefore I don't know anybody, therefore I can't do anything. My thing is, I'm here to guide you. But then here's the pitch to all of this, the follow-up and the execution. You can give the advice, and unless you have them handed in a second time, and I'm checking the LinkedIn profiles, and sometimes they give me exactly what they gave me before. The follow-up and the follow-through and the execution is what's missing. I mean, we do a lot of talking on the front end, but we need to build in some follow-up, follow-through, and keeping people on track. Now, that's the thankless part of the job. But I will say I follow, and now I'm very selective. I used to have all my students connect with me. Now I wait to see who asks at the end of the course, especially since I'm talking about it every week, right? And there have been a few I didn't accept, and there have been a few I had to disconnect from because they was posting inappropriate stuff. We talk about that too. You're associated with whoever you're associated with speaks volumes to your brand. Right. So also be careful about who you connect with. Make sure you're monitoring things. There was a woman I worked with for years, and I was really stunned how she was carrying on about our former president. And I finally just disconnected. I was stunned. I just disconnected. She was talking badly about the president before. I mean, the whole thing was, I just never would have thought that she would have done that, but I just disconnected. So the networking thing is really important. And, I give good examples. So your parents, before we were in the pandemic, parents are at the soccer game. Parents get to talk and both parents are laid off. They get to talk and they give a referral. You got to talk to people. You can't be embarrassed about what's going on. In the past, it used to be, if you got fired, it's a big ding. Well, everybody's been through some crisis at this point. So get over it already and get busy about having conversations that can benefit you. But you have to realize it's not a sprint, it's a journey.
Right, it's a marathon.
You have to really, patience and stay at it. You just can't do something 1 week and say, well, nothing happened. Well, did you follow up? Well, Professor Blakely gave me the name and I reached out to him. They didn't get back to me. You need to circle back to me to say, hey, I sent a note to Kyle and I didn't hear back. I checked with Kyle. He had a death in the family. Kyle has not been around because he's got something else going on. So I think people easily give up and they don't circle back to the original link so they can intervene on their behalf. Now, this requires a little bit of work and being organized and having a spreadsheet so you can keep up with what you're doing.
Right.
So at the end of the week, you feel like you have some sense of accomplishment. For my procrastinators, and those are folks who wait to the very last minute for everything, and then they want you to be on top of it, I suggest you plan out your week somehow, right? because people will really get tired of you being a last minute kind of always emergency, urgency problem.
Yeah.
And there are lots of procrastinators. They just say, I just wait to the last minute and then I stay up all night, and, you know. So I'm not telling you to change your personality, but you got to consider you're involving someone else, and you really want to be sensitive to their time and schedule, because everybody's got something going on.
Right. Consider others. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my long-winded answer on networking.
No, that's a thorough answer, Ms. Blakely. That's a thorough answer.
Here, man. We're getting workshops. She's driving workshops.
Yeah, and they coming, family. The workshops are coming. Best believe that. But she's giving all day.
I have a compound answer, because everything you said, Ms. Blakely, is on point. Wow. Well, real quick, I want to deal with the surface, social media posting awareness. You're absolutely correct about that. I have one-to-one mentoring with students as well every week, and I do it via Zoom. And one of the things we had a jovial conversation where, as forgive my visual here, but I'm just trying to nail the point home. They would do young men in particular, and some young women would post on Facebook, and they would do the middle finger like that, and it's and I'm like, do you realize when you go into a job interview, they're looking on social media, they're gonna look up your name, they're gonna look, and if they see this and your head down and you doing gang signs and stuff, that's going to affect your chance of getting a job. So be very conscious of what you post on social media, especially Snapchat and TikTok and all these other things. Even when Snapchat's design is it posts up 1 second and then disappears. It doesn't have a database that collects this information on file for years, 10 years, 20 years. We could go into the story on that. So I wanted to touch on that. Thank you. That's a very good point that young people need to understand.
And I just want to chime in and say, I tell them all the time, I say, oh, but my account's on private. I say, yes. And all these companies are hiring all the people that penetrated their systems. And I said, they can find anything they want to find. So trust me, it's not private.
Very good. Excellent. The question I also want to ask is your age range. I hear you mention students. I hear you mention in other words, microwave oven society, mentality. They want to get quick. What are the age range of students that you teach, Ms. Blakely?
Well, at a community college, you get everything except the kitchen sink. You have people returning back to school. You have students who just left high school. You have folks that transferred in. We did have international students, so it ranges. And I have the vets who will come in and tell me, well, I'm a vet and I don't need to do all this. I said, oh, you need to do more of it, because you got to translate the vet talk into real talk.
Right.
So it runs from high school all the way up to senior citizens.
Wow. Okay. Gotcha.
And these are the ones who have to embrace technology, who said, I have a friend on the West Coast who said, I'm quitting my job as a union rep for the San Francisco School District because every week they have a new system for me to learn. And I only like to use PowerPoint. I said, so what you going to do when you retire? She says, I'm going to start dating. I said, well, that requires going on some systems.
Right.
so it's kind of like,
yeah, it does.
Okay. So I just kind of laughed because I thought that's not going to go well, because you got to add all this information and blah, blah, blah. So,
Thank you. So final question, Kyle, let me hand it back over to you.
Sure.
Some of the things I teach my students particularly is the unconventional approach towards career development or profession. And basically is this. So when I ask my students, okay, what do you do when you first get the job? Show up on time, obviously, right? Do the work, obviously. But it ties into your point in regards to networking. And one of the things, a lot of things I give them, but one of the things I tell them is like that person, when you get there, find out who connects with you, right? Find out, what you have in common. Build that network, like you said, that connection. Because what I also try and instill in these young people is that the days have passed where our parents used to work aren't the days now. You can't expect to stay on the job for 40 years and get a pension, even though you get a gold-plated pen and a certificate after 40 years.
Maybe a watch.
maybe a watch. So I said, those days are gone. I said, now what it is within 4 to 5 years, the company is either looking to promote you or fire you because of the work, typically because of the work that you're doing. So you want to establish your network, whereas when that 4-year, 5-year comes in and they're looking at evaluating your work ethic, maybe within every year, because you have a yearly evaluation, of course. But I'm saying usually in regards to that promotion status, you want to that person who you met when you first got there, probably left after 4 or 5 years. They're working someplace else.
Mm-hmm.
So to avoid that employment agency thing where you got to submit your resume and you got to get called in now, what they do now, I say what you want is you want to have somebody already in or plugged in another company, whereas you have their contact information. You can call them up and say, listen, you know, what's going on there? Because this is somebody you met, you've established that relationship with, you know, can you put a good word in for me? Like you said with LinkedIn and putting, you know, getting that recommendation. So these are the things that I kind of share with them, tidbit. I'm being brief, but there's a lot more to it. But tidbits that I get in regards to building that network and getting your foot in the door in another company with somebody you already know, whereas you don't have to start that relationship from scratch and they don't know where you stand and they don't know your work ethic. That's tying into my question, which is this: what industries seem to be minimizing and others advancing currently and in the next 5 years?
Okay, I'm going to answer that, but I just want to tag on to what you said. Those are known as employee referrals when people refer you into a company.
Yes.
And I always tell folks when you're asking someone to refer you in, don't say, can you take my resume to human resources? Say, would you be comfortable in referring me? You give the person options.
Very good.
I will definitely tell them no. Some people they'll say everything, I've been busy, I couldn't do it, you know, and they have their reasons why, right? But it's known as an employee referral program. I used to handle those. And, you know, you stay a couple of months and then you get a referral, you get paid a fee. And I tell my students who want to work at Google, they pay $35,000 as an employee referral fee, which is a down payment on a house in the Bay Area for engineers at Google. And I tell them, I said, you know what? If I refer you, I'm going to coach you every step of the way. So when you get there, you don't go in and blow the whole thing. Because if I'm opening the door and you come in unprepared and talking out the left side of your head, you know, it reflects on me. So people need to understand not everybody's comfortable in referring them because they have some concerns and they may not even talk about them, but at least they should say, they should word the question, would you be comfortable?
Very good.
So industries, you said the ones that are shrinking or the ones that are growing?
Both. Can you give us some insight on the ones that's minimizing?
All right. So
next 5 years.
Let's start with the positives first. So we know that cleaning services are in hot demand. Delivery services, everybody's getting stuff delivered, right?
Right.
How about grocery stores? Those frontline workers, they're still working every day, right? But they're not getting all the praise. But if they didn't get the food on the shelves, we couldn't get it to our table. Yep.
Facts. Very true.
Liquor stores, more people are drinking more alcohol. That's not a good thing, but liquor stores have done very well. Gaming companies, a lot of my students say, all I do is play games all day. And I'm thinking, okay, so how about your communications and your interpersonal skills? But gaming has gone through the roof during the pandemic.
Yeah, gaming. Just to interject, Ms. Blakely, gaming is a $1 billion industry. It is gaining more revenue than the film industry.
Correct. And I work with students that do nothing but gaming at the college. So, you know, it's very interesting. So telehealth. So now you get charged the same amount to talk to your doctor over the screen as you do going in. And I've had a couple of appointments with my mother. So telehealth is a big thing. Even though my mother's doctor said it's hard to see the sore on the arm when you're looking on the screen. But telehealth is a big deal, right? Tutoring services. A lot of parents who have the money and the wherewithal are paying for virtual tutoring services for their kids because they don't want to put them in the schools because the schools can't figure out what they're doing with this pandemic. Used cars. As you know, we're having problems with chips. And of course, with this most recent flood, now it's even worse. A used car has doubled in value because they can't make enough new cars. Okay. And mental health is a big deal now. You know, as people of color, brown and black, we normally don't talk about this, but mental health services behavioral services have gone through the roof. The demand is so high, they don't have enough people to help all the folks that are calling in. And I have some suggestions around that. If you're in a college or somewhere where they have counseling services, you might want to use that. There's some virtual online services that are available for people of brown and black color. And I will share that at the end when we do our resources. But also home health. My mother is 88. I just hired a young lady who just started her own business. And this is in a state 10 hours away. And it's hard to find anybody because of all the issues around the elderly, COVID, people not wanting to go in those environments. So these places are growing. It's a lot of stuff. Yeah. That's just a little bit. So now let's talk about what has kind of been a problem during the pandemic. live events, going to the concerts outside. They started back up, but I just think we're going to have a scenario where it's going to play itself out like the summer. We're going to spike again, which we're spiking in some places already. But live events, retail definitely suffered. Luxury and items were a problem for a minute, but I understand people in Japan are shopping like nobody's business. But
yeah, they are.
Luxury items are definitely a hot mess. And then movie theaters. If you go to the movie now, you can be about no more than 10 people are in the theater. My mother and I went to see Aretha's Respect, and there were 10 people in the theater. Real estate. Everybody's working from home now. San Francisco, New York City, all the big cities, they're trying to figure out what to do with the real estate. I have a cousin who is in Virginia, and he's the second in command at FDA. And I listened to one of his calls where they're trying to figure out what to do with all these FDA properties they have because everybody's working from home.
Wow.
That's the government.
Wow.
And then we have car rentals. People weren't traveling. I think, was it Hertz that sold their fleet over the pandemic? One of the rental.
Hertz. Yeah, it was Hertz.
Yeah, what's the matter?
Yeah, I remember reading that article.
I'm amazed at this. Man, this is you've never thinking of stuff.
Family, y'all get privy information, family. Take notes.
Cruises, before what was that thing that was happening on the cruise with there was some kind of disease that was going on. Now cruises obviously try to ramp back up, but the first few ships that went out, they had to come back to the harbor because COVID is out there. So it's sort of a hot mess, and people really, here's what I say to folks. A lot of people are admitting that they're shutting off the news because it's too negative, but you need to set up some alerts around business so you understand the dynamics of what's really happening and how it impacts you and what you're going to be able to do. And I tell my students, if you spend all your money on buying sneakers that cost $600, you need to sell some of your sneakers, invest in some high-end computer equipment so you can have options, because everything's online now, right? And for those of you who hate technology, you need to get with your nieces and nephews, have them get you up to speed on these social media platforms, pick one or two, so at least you can be in the game. Because anything that's done now, go to this website, scan this. There's no option really for senior citizens beyond 80. They think everybody's computer literate. And there's still some adults who still will tell you, I don't do this, I don't do that. It's like they say, if you don't use it, you lose it. And if you don't join in, what happens is you get passed by.
So that ties into my next question, Ms. Blakely, is the whole pivoting thing, the whole term pivoting. That's been a huge term, especially during the pandemic, for obvious reasons. But, and I heard of the term pre-COVID, but could you please break down what that means and what that can mean to someone who's recently lost their job, or they're here in the pandemic and they're just not fulfilled as far as their purpose or what they really want to do? Could you break that down for us or give us some insight?
So let's talk about the word pivoting. Really, I want to say it's just doubling down on what you do extremely well and making a shift to a different direction. So let's say you're in a car driving down the road, and in the US, we drive on the right side. In Europe, they drive on the left side. That's a shift, but you're still using the same skills. You're driving the car, right?
Right.
So I want to talk a little bit about how you can pivot, because first of all, you need to understand what you're good at. And for those of you who really don't own what you're good at, when people say you're good at that, not really. You hear that a lot from students. Well, I just do it for my friends. I want you to embrace, if more than 3 people say you're good at something, they didn't talk to each other, it has merit. So first of all, embrace what you do well. And everybody on this call has different skill sets. And then you need to evaluate your situation around skills, interests. You may do things on the side that really bring you a lot of, joy. You need to try to figure out a way to make that work for you and make some income from that. You may say, okay, so how do I find out what to charge?
Right.
onetonline.org will tell you that. And that's going to be one of our resources. All right. www.onetonline.org. You can check
website. Very thorough website. Yes.
Every kind of position in all 50 states. If you want to move somewhere, I tell you what the going rate is, what skills are in demand. And if you have those skills, you should definitely push them to the top of your document, not at the bottom. And then you want to also plan a strategy. It's one thing to think about something. It's another to write it down and have some goals in place. So let's say you want to get a certificate in project management. You can identify free online resources, free courses. You can get certificates. There are all kinds of free classes that are offered on the internet. And a lot of them are offering certificates that you can post to your LinkedIn, and they're valid. And a lot of the colleges now are introducing mini certificate programs, meaning you can get the same certificate in a shorter amount of time. So it's called micro learning. Okay. So that's something else to look at. Another thing to do is to shadow someone that's doing the work. In other words, that means follow them. Now, physically, I used to say you can go to the office. Now you may have to do it virtually. But if you admire somebody from afar, you can certainly say to them, I really like your work. I would just love to watch how you do that. How can we set that up? And then send them a thank you note after they've given you that opportunity. That would be the smart thing to do, because then they would remember that, right? And then, of course, you need to network. Lord, I can't even talk enough about that. You need to let people know what it is you want to do, where you're trying to go, and ask them who might they recommend. Remember, I said earlier, don't ask for a job. Right. You can say, who could be helpful to me? Right. And then follow through on the leads, and then circle back to them. You want to seek somebody that can mentor you. We try to be all things to a lot of students, but I think we should be trying to recruit some associates that have more time than they can spare and complain about they don't have anything to do, but they may be resourceful for students, and they can just have a weekly call, or before we used to say try to have a cup of coffee or tea if you have money issues. Right. But you definitely want to mentor someone. You want somebody who can really give it to you straight, and you're not offended. So those are special kinds of people, because most people will say everything but what they need to say. But there are some that will step up to the plate. And then you want to actually do something with all this information. This is where people just kind of get stuck. They feel overwhelmed. Oh, it's so much. I got the network and I need to do the rest. Put it together in a plan, step by step. Every week, take an assessment of where you are and get some things done. Because if you never step off the cliff and do it, you'll never know what could have happened. Right. And it's interesting how some people can be very jealous of other people. Well, how'd they get that job? I would say, did you ask them? Be curious. Ask people, how did they arrive to where they are? And again, the active listening comes into play. And that in itself, if you're listening, you may pick up some tips that could be helpful to you.
Wow.
Yes. Oh, yes. And just to add on, Ms. Blakely, I and this is including myself too in this. I think a lot of times initially when you're asking questions, you don't know how to ask the questions because you don't want to offend people. And also, again, speaking from my own development, a lot of times you are afraid to ask because if you do get a no, it's almost like not like your world is over, but it's more like you don't have the resolve of rejection of no. And you feel like, well, if that person doesn't help me, then maybe no one will help me. You go to extreme.
So let me chime in on the no. Yeah. So when people say no, I always say, can you tell me why? And do you have somebody else that I might be able to talk to? See, I just don't let it drop. I kind of like, okay, so I get it. Who else might be helpful to me that you might want to? And then I say, can I use your name? Because sometimes people say, contact Glenda, but don't give her my name. And then people never do anything with it because they say, well, she said not to you. I don't know what to do. So I tell people, you can stretch it a little bit and say, I've been networking profusely and your name keeps on coming up. So that must be a good sign.
Good job, Ms. Blakely. Excellent. Wow. So before I tie into this, I want to, I guess the answer is basic, as simple as, it's a no-brainer, but I want to just get your take on it anyway before I ask the other question. And it's in terms of what you said, the bottleneck, where everybody, we're in the information age, we collect all this information, but we don't know what to do with it. And the simple answer pretty much is, because Cal and I talk about this as well, action steps, tangible, right? Step by step. At the end of the week, do an evaluation. How much have you accomplished? That's why you have a to-do list, right?
Right.
But it seems like Ms. Blakely, I don't know. I don't have the answer. It baffles me. Why is it, particularly as a culture, we find ourselves in this state of paralyzation? We're not taking the necessary steps to do what we need to do. It's real simple. Like you said, if they give you a no, okay, fine. Can you refer me to someone else, or why? Why?
Mm-hmm.
And then take that. Like, for example, well, let me clarify that statement, right? If there's something that we want, we know if we really want it, we will work, we will do whatever it takes to get it.
That's what I said earlier.
Yeah. We'll make it happen. But it's that temporary stuff. It's the sneakers. It's the games, right? The things that give us immediate satisfaction. But in regards to long-term success, in regards to long-term development, things of that nature, for example, taking that $600, like you said, and instead of putting it in sneakers, put it in the stock option, put it in investment that'll give us all. How come we're losing that? How come we don't understand the value of long-term investment? I just want to get your take or your opinion.
I do think it's a fact that we haven't always had money to invest, but there are plenty of apps out there now that can take your change and give you investments, right? So maybe the thing to do is to turn the kids on to the little apps since they love their phones, and have them talk about how much money you could potentially save, because down the road there would be a crisis and you need funds, right? So I also think it's important for us not to forget that, if you're working from paycheck to paycheck, you should figure out a way to pay yourself, or at least get a side gig and put that money away, so that if something happens, you have something to fall back on. A lot of people are living from paycheck to paycheck, right? Yeah. And they don't have a plan in place for what if.
Yeah, it's like 47%. I've looked at it, like 47% of the American families are living paycheck to paycheck, right below poverty line or right at poverty line.
Right. And so what happens is when the crisis hits, like it has with the pandemic, people are just unprepared because they thought this could never happen. Right. I think it's very interesting in the Northeast in particular that people put on such a tough exterior, and when a crisis hit, all bets are off. You see a side of them you didn't even know existed because they thought this could never happen in their lifetime. Hurricane, what was that first hurricane we had in New York?
Was it?
It wasn't Irene.
No, it was Sandy. Hurricane Sandy.
Yeah, and so this last one we just had, people still in shock, right? Yeah.
Hurricane Ida.
And so do we have a plan in place for emergencies? No. Have we planned for, if we end up with COVID, we're not around? No. We just are not planning. And I think a lot of it has to do with sometimes people are in denial.
Okay. And
then the other thing is, somebody else will take care of it. Well, who's the somebody else? Can you name a name? So I think that people, sometimes you have folks that really would rather not know about it, act like it's not going to ever happen, and just hope everything will take care of itself. And then there are those who know it needs to happen, but they keep on procrastinating to the point that it does happen. It's still unprepared. And then you have those who always try to have a plan in place, and everybody says they're a little anal because they're always planning something. So, it's all these different spectrums. But I think the pandemic has pushed everybody to think about planning.
Okay.
I've read a lot of articles on that. It's a brisk business now.
Okay.
Family, definitely like, subscribe, share this video. If you're watching it by yourself or with your peers, please share this video. She's dropping a lot of information. We want to make sure everybody's, for the most part, is privy to some of it. But again, like, share, subscribe to the Grand Rising Collective podcast. You know what I'm saying? So you got a lot of more people coming forth, and we have interviewed a lot of people in the past, so definitely check it out. But right now we're with Miss Glenda Blakely, career transition guru, educator, professor, future seeker, future sight holder, because fortune foreteller, because she's dropping gems today. She dropping gems.
So this leads into my next question, Ms. Blake, and thank you, Kyle, for that. Awesome. How can we use social media sites to better our careers or create more opportunities for financial security? Kind of what you already led to, as a matter of fact. And what are the negatives?
Okay. So if you're a creative person, you definitely should link social media, all your social media, to your portfolio and your work. I always tell students that your portfolio is an ongoing process. Some students, I don't want to put it up until it's finished. It's not going to ever be finished because it's called a portfolio. So you always want to put your best work up. Make sure you have somebody looking at it and edit it so it's not full of typos. Also, make sure that you are being consistent in your messaging. You don't want to have a picture of you purple on one and orange on another and a different name and all. There are all these things. People go by memes, different names. You can't find them. I tell them, look, figure out what you want to go by and be consistent in your messaging, right? You can also upload your projects. You can upload podcasts. You can upload everything to social media. You can link it all together, right? Now on LinkedIn, because I'm a big LinkedIn fanatic, they should probably pay me for all the free advertisement I give them. But I agree. Yeah, I actually, upload lots of, when I do presentations like today's, I'll eventually upload it to LinkedIn, right? So when you're reading, I'm actually showing you that it happened, and I'm validating that I am what I say I am. So I tell people, make sure whatever you're saying you are, the content reflects that, but don't use the social media to, and I love this when students will write, and I show some of this in my class, 10 postings that got people fired. So a young lady in California hadn't even started the job with Hewlett Packard. She lived in the Bay Area, and she was commuting down to the southern tip of the San Francisco, and she's complaining already before she started that she had a 2-hour commute. Somebody sent it to the boss, and he said, "We read postings, and you don't report on Monday." Ooh. And then, she was wondering, well, I just said what I was thinking. I mean, she's the one who took the job. Nobody forced her to take it, right? And then we have those where when you go on vacation and people say, and you're having one too many and you're out there twerking, and someone says, "Do you mind if we videotape?" And the woman says no. She comes back. She's a teacher. One of the parents gets hold of the video. They send it to the Board of Ed. She's fired. Don't say you're sick and at a funeral and you show a post where you're partying in some costume. I mean, these are all the things that I put up and have students read, and you'll be surprised. Some students say she was on vacation. She shouldn't have lost her job. Well, it is a 2-hour commute. I said, yeah, but because, and I said, did you hear that the man said in the background, "Do you mind if we take this?" I mean, she was so drunk, it wasn't funny. I said, and she said, yes, she gave him permission. And the other thing I tell him is, you need to think about how many people just whip their cameras out and start videotaping. I've seen it a lot. They don't ask you nothing. They just videotape. I said, we're on camera wherever we go. So you need to kind of remember that, right? Yeah. But I get very mixed emotions. It ain't fair. They shouldn't be doing all this. And I said, and you know what? Now they want you to get vaccinated in order to get a job. I said, that's the new wrinkle in the thing. I said, it used to be background checks, urine, references, multiple interviews. I said, they just keep on adding things now. I said, so you can say, "Oh, well, I ain't gonna get no vaccine. I'm gonna start my own business." I said, yeah, welcome to the real world, because then you have even more to deal with, because what if your customers don't want to get vaccinated? I mean, all these things impact you, whether you're working for somebody else or you're working for yourself. I mean, you can choose not to get vaccinated, but then don't put everybody else at risk. So that's the new wrinkle in all of this. Adding, now that it's mandatory in lots of places, don't be getting on the internet talking about, I don't believe in vaccinations, because I've had students come in and say, I went to an interview yesterday, professor, and the guy said at the end, "So you want to rule the world, huh?" And the student said, "I almost passed out because I posted that the night before on my Facebook." I said, well, they don't need your social security anymore. They just type in your name.
Yeah.
I said, and all this ranting and raving about your personal business and your life. I said, at some point you may decide that you overshared, but you can't take it back, because now it's all out there for everybody to see. So I always say a little mystery is good. If you want to tell it all, then what is there left to tell?
What did he say? And to quote the words of the illustrious comedian Dave Chappelle, "When keeping it real goes wrong."
Yeah, so I'm just saying, I just think it's too much oversharing going on.
Yeah.
I call it oversharing, right? I was on a Zoom call last week with a student, and he was really acting out pretty bad, so bad that one guy said to him, "I want to chime in to my colleague." He said, "You're so negative. If you keep that up, nobody's going to want to work for you." And he said exactly what I thought. And I sent him a little note and said, "Thank you for keeping it real." And then the student volunteered that he was in the hospital. I said, "Stop." I stopped him in the middle of the sentence on the call, because now he's going down a lane and he's talking about all his hospitalizations. That's personal information. Although I will say to you, having worked in human resources for 100 years almost, this whole thing about discussing people's COVID status, to me, it's violating the HIPAA rule, the Privacy Act. Because everybody is, he tested positive, and this morning I saw that Fred Hammond is announcing that he tested positive. I'm thinking, okay,
wow. Okay.
So it's kind of like we're in a different zone now.
Yeah.
And the rules don't really apply anymore because everybody's telling everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Ms. Blakely, I always felt like, even though I didn't really pick up on it till years later when I became an adult, this whole posting people's salary, like these professional salaries online, like so-and-so just signed a deal for $35 million for 5 years on the Lakers, and so-and-so, like I'm like, man, they're just salary just all out for everybody to see. Like, so it's like asking for some money. In case
this is so interesting. I have a nephew who played internationally for 10 years, and he just retired. And he was in the New York Times 4 years ago, and he was playing for the Chinese, and they posted how much he was making. They talked about how you can make more money playing international basketball than you can playing for the NBA. Mm-hmm. And his father was very upset about it. And I just hope that he was making good choices and investing accordingly, because, once you stop playing, your money is dried up. So I think I will say this. That's a great example, Kyle, because I was visiting my mother down south, and the state shall remain nameless. And they've been having a lot of people, of young males of color, being killed in a particular school. Mm-hmm. And they said nobody's talking. And I was sitting there looking at the news. I said, no wonder nobody's talking. They said, we arrested so-and-so last night, and so-and-so gave him up. They're telling who's telling. Wow. Who's going to be talking if you're broadcasting on the news? Who gave you up? So there's a whole thing around communications. I think it's just gone so far that people don't care what they say, when they say it, who they embarrass. They're broadcasting people's business. You have no privacy. So it seems like to me you would guard that and not just overshare so much. Mm-hmm. There's something to be said about it remaining a little bit of a mystery.
Mm-hmm. Should men and women in colleges consider other options with tuition, COVID, anxiety at an increasing high, the lack of motivation in regards to higher education? Is there an alternative or option to education or college in light of all these things?
The studies have shown that now everybody's questioning why you're paying $26,000 a year to go to a college, and when you get out there are no jobs. Mm-hmm. So I know for a fact that electricians make 6 digits, so there needs to be, in some states, they've gone with the whole blue collar training, and they put systems into place where when the kids graduate, they already have a job and they're making real money. They're not making $15 an hour. So there's been a shift towards more realistic careers where there is a need. Because before the pandemic, and I know down south, people are renovating and buying houses. There are not enough houses. So Home Depot's stock just went up because of all the renovation that's been going on. Mm-hmm. But I also know that, there are plenty of scholarships out there. There's scholarship if your hand is purple, if your hair is green. I mean, we just don't research all of the different avenues in scholarships, grants. And now with the whole thing last summer with George Floyd, everybody's trying to offer up something to increase to increase diversity. And I think if I were a kid right now, I'd be milking it for all it's worth because there are so many opportunities. So I do think there's some options, certificates. This whole working from home thing allows for you to deal with elder care and child care issues because that's a big clog in the lane for people trying to go back to work. So I think also we need to look at other careers that are not typical. And, women have made some inroads in some careers, but I think we shouldn't discourage people if they say they want to be something other than a rapper, basketball star, or a gospel singer. I think we should, and I'll give you a great example. I'm a huge Cirque du Soleil fan. And they're the French entertainment company. And I actually sent them a long letter, Guy Liberty, and asked him for a meeting because I wanted to see why they didn't have more people that looked like me in their shows. Now, when you go to Vegas, you see a lot more of them. So I met with them. They gave me an audience, and the comment was made that they don't come to their shows. But I noticed the next year when they came to New York City, they had more diversity in terms of boxes and blocks of tickets they were giving away. I think it's interesting when kids, and I try to post in all of my Blackboard shells in my courses, people that are brown and Black that are doing things that are unusual and doing it well. Like a football player who writes children's books, and he's also an animator. If there's a woman who does 3D animation, I post that. I'm always looking for somebody to go, oh, I didn't know that. So this is a resource for them. And I always encourage them to reach out for informational interviews to ask them how it all came to be. Because it's not always the way it looks, right? But if you never ask, you never know. Like right now on Broadway in Manhattan, there are 7, first time in history, 7 Black plays that are being presented in the history of theater for the first time ever.
Wow. Okay.
So, I post all this stuff because you follow these people and you notice that they've been at it for a while. It didn't happen overnight. And this is the reason I tell students, you got to build up. You can't just jump from the beginning and go to the end and think something magical is going to happen. So again, I'm always trying to drive the point that longevity gives you results. You have to do the work, be diligent, and be patient.
Persistent.
Well, persistent, but with some degree of decor. You can be persistent, be a pest, especially if you don't know how to do it. And I think a lot of the students struggle with how to word things.
Yes.
I mean, we can say you need to do this, but then how do you really put that into words?
Good point.
It's almost like you have to give them the script, and I actually give them a script on their pitches, 30-second pitches, and I say, imagine this: you get on the elevator. And you've been trying to meet with this person. It's just you and that person on the elevator going up 30 floors. This is your opportunity. This is your chance. Now, what would you say? I said, because sometimes the opportunity presents itself, and you need to be ready.
Yeah, true.
So the thing about the mental health, you need to ask for help, get the help. If you can't afford the help, you need to reach out for community services because there are things that are available on sliding scales. There are plenty of virtual mental health geared toward brown and Black people that are on the internet now, and they offer free sessions. But you never know this unless you're reading. Now, some students tell me they don't do play games all day. I said, so who can tell me who won an Oscar last night, an animation Oscar around hair? Nobody knew. And I said, so you go to an interview and they ask you that, and you're going to say you don't know. They're going to think, okay, so. And
that's your field. That's your profession you're trying to get into.
Exactly. And so I say to them, I'm not asking you to read everything, but don't declare to me that you want to be the next Spike Lee and you can't tell me who won the Oscar last night.
Right.
I mean, that kind of says to me you're not taking it seriously. It's just sort of a dream and you hope it all kind of works out.
But that's part of the litmus test with the questions that I ask students too in regards to whatever career or field of interest they're in. I said, okay, so what was the last book that you read in relation to that field? When was the last time you've been to the library? How many books do you have in your home on that topic? And it kind of, exposes that.
Well, on the answer to that is that when they try to wing it and give you them sly answers, oh, I read this, I read that. I said, and so tell me, what was that all about?
Yes.
When they go, I said, okay. I said, all right. I said to them, people like folks that don't try to pull the wool over their eyes. I said, just imagine, you know how a salesperson talks so fast your head is spinning. It's a problem before they even finish up because they didn't pause for anything. I said, you always want, if you say something, you need to be able to back it up. With a real solid example. I said, you increase your credibility threefold if you do that.
Yeah. Show what he used to tell us, Kayode, show and prove.
Yeah, that's right.
Show and prove. You got to
I tell them in my class when they start with these general answers, I said, now the routine in this class. I need a specific example. I said, because when you're in an interview, you got to give people something to hold on to. So if you start out with these general comments and you wax in poetry and they're asking about the sky and you're talking about the moon, or you're talking about something, I said it's a problem because you didn't really hear the question nor did you answer.
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah. So many just tangible. Oh my gosh. Yeah, so many just tangible. And you kind of pre-answered the question before we go ask the last question of the day. But yeah, these are just tangible things, Professor Blakely, Ms. Blakely, that we have geared away from, especially with this newer generation. And again, it's not all their bad. It's not all their fault. But like I say, it takes professors like you and instructors as myself, educators myself and Kayode to kind of bring them back into the fold and be in line with what they say they want to do. But then do your actions match up with that? And I always ask my students, like you said, what are you reading? What are you looking into? Who's the top 3, top 5 people in your field that you look to model? You know, like if you want to be a producer, a music producer, who's the top 5 producers you listen to? And do you know their works? You should be able to rattle off 5 songs, at least from each producer. Mm-hmm. You know, if that's what you like, if that's what you're into, mm-hmm. You know, like I'm a Spike Lee fan. You know, me and my other business partner, Corey Smallwood, we started a film production company, Precise Minds Filmworks. We can rattle off at least 7 Spike Lee films and tell you what the characters were and tell you what the plot was about and tell you how he made it. Why? Because we've read like countless books on film and media mm-hmm. and Spike Lee books. We saw out. We met Spike a few times and we read his books. Anything we read. So it's like, not because we felt like we had to, but more so because we wanted to.
Right. And you'd have an interesting conversation with him if you ever get a chance to be seated at the table.
Oh,
you
yes.
know, it won't be just, I admire your work. Oh my God. You know.
Yeah. It's more so like, so when you shot that shot on She's Gotta Have It, how did that, you know, that's the talk that we had. Like, so how did you set up that camera? Like, you know, it's like, I love your work, but what about this shot right here? I just
don't think they're curious enough. I sometimes think the curiosity is the problem, but then I don't know how people get in such awe that they can't speak. It's kind of like they go, oh, Jesus. It's kind of like, okay, let's see how long that's going to last. Yeah. And they keep on saying, I admire your work. I'm thinking, okay, can they give us something else? Right.
Right.
You're much more interesting if you're not saying what everybody else is saying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very good.
And asking some open-ended questions. You notice I said open-ended.
Yep.
And you always close with, so how can we stay in touch? Do I have to contact somebody in your organization? If you feel like the synergy is there, you should say, I'd love to stay in touch. How might you suggest we do that?
Mm-hmm.
But they'll say, well, why would you want to stay in touch with me? I said, did you ask? The answer might have been yes, but you never asked.
Well said.
And I love how they say, I was just shocked. I said, but you see, if you never just go ahead and do, you never know what could have happened.
Mm-hmm. 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 Ask and you shall receive. What's something that we as professionals, educators, parents, and colleagues can do just to make sure that not just in networking for a career, but just the livelihood of us getting through this difficult time during the pandemic, this challenging time? What can we do to, I guess, support each other in pivoting, in being in line with our career or purpose as far as a job is concerned? What can we do?
Well, first of all, check in on your dear and close friends. And I'm not talking about your Facebook friends, because a lot of people have lots of friends. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about your circle that knows you well, right? And also be interested in hearing what other people are going through, because you might pick up something you hadn't thought about.
Definitely.
Career-wise, you want to definitely be understanding. And I give great examples. I was thinking about this a lot since we've been talking. I said, now we had to pivot in education. And for people who had not used any of the software systems like Blackboard or Canvas, they quit because the pivot was too deep for them to be able to make the transition and teach online. For restaurants, the ones that were successful already had long-term relationships with the customers, and they pivot, and it's now take out and order only, and they kept their numbers they were able to stay open.
Yes.
You also need to see how you can actually shrink all of your spending. Do you need to have a Starbucks coffee every morning? I had a student who presented last year, and she told me she had calculated she spent $15,000 on Starbucks coffee she has to have every morning. She explained the whole thing that was in it, and she said, I'm embarrassed when I think about it, but she just had to have this one special Como Latte
yeah.
$15,000, right?
Does she have stock?
No.
Wow.
It was over the years.
Yeah, but still.
So I had a student who came and he said he was trying to get an internship, but he needed a camera, but he couldn't afford one. I looked down at his sneakers. I said, how much you pay for your sneakers? He said, $300. I said, how many pairs do you have? He said, 6. I said, well, now, I think you could go buy you a camera if you sold some of those sneakers.
I think so.
It's calling shifting your priorities in the right place to get to where you want to go. We can all cut back on something, right? Mm-hmm. So It might be your Starbucks. It might be that you got to have this certain Thai dish. You know, you just need to kind of reassess and figure out how you can reduce your footprint and also try to manage to live. Because if you've been living under your budget, you might be okay for a minute. But if you've just been stretching and everything is to the max, you know, you got to have some real come to Jesus conversations with yourself around, okay, do I really need this? What can I sell? What can I get rid of? The platform that's really interesting is how now everybody's selling everything online. Facebook Marketplace. I've had my neighbor move from behind me, a woman down the road. They were just selling stuff like hotcakes on the Facebook Marketplace. You know how you used to try to have a yard sale or whatever else? You just go on Facebook, post a picture, and people come and buy it.
Wow.
Even thrift stores have gone online.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So that, you know, things have shifted and you need to kind of figure out, okay, how much stuff do I have? Do I really need all this stuff? And then, you know, I always say, where a lot of us are no longer dressing up anymore, you should see me think about, okay, do I have to put on something to get on this call? So, you know, you need to think about giving your clothes to organizations that help women that are transitioning out of shelter into trying to find. There are all these things you can do with your stuff that can still leave you with a good feeling, and you just don't throw it to the curb. So I think you need to be thinking about recycling stuff for folks who are less fortunate, doing things virtually online with groups that, you know, can help you still volunteer and build up your skill set, taking classes online that are free. All the colleges are linked up to LinkedIn Learning. It's a free platform. There are plenty of universities that offer courses that people have been taking for years, and we'll put that in the resources. And you know, become certified in something. Learn a language. You know, if you always wanted to move to Italy, hey, you know, you've been 18 months, you know, do the online course for learning Italian.
Right. And Duolingo is a good website for that. I use that family in learning Portuguese and Spanish and French, you know, so yeah, so that's something I've been using for years, and it's free.
Yep. So these are some of the things that you can do. I think for the students, the thing to get them to understand is they're so used to everything happening for them and nobody telling them no. It's really been hard for them to make this adjustment. A couple of students have written pre-pandemic, post-pandemic papers for me, and they said, I used to have freedom when I got on the subway to come to class and I was in class. Now I'm at home with all my family. We're stacked on top of each other, and I feel like my head is going to explode. So they've given up their freedom because they had to take the courses online. And a lot of those kids are driving the demand to have courses back in the classroom. So they're having to learn how to cope with that. Now, one student did say last week, her family was able to move the whole family because she said it was so bad. Nobody was getting anything done. So they moved to a bigger place where there's more space. Not everybody has that option. But I also say, you know, you need to invest in some good technology, and because everything's pretty much virtual. And I think we're going to be like this for a minute. I don't, you know, because we don't have a lot of compliance.
Okay.
All right. And man, family. Oh God, Professor Blakely, Ms. Glenda Blakely, thank you so much for spending your time with us.
My pleasure.
This is awesome.
And sharing all this just tangible information and strategies and ways to think about the new dynamic of how we move forward in our careers and our personal lives during this pandemic. Because like I said, it's been a challenge for everybody at various levels. And we want to have, you know, someone as yourself on the platform to give us some more insight on some of the things that we're struggling with, but also some of the things that may be coming around the curve that we aren't aware of to maybe prepare for. So much thank you for that. Very, very thankful.
You're welcome. I just want to mention one other thing. When you're looking for work now, you want to look for jobs that you can work from home. And there are multiple sites out there that do nothing but focus in on virtual jobs. And that would be part of the resources.
Okay.
So please add those resources. And now we're at the end. We're going to close our closing remarks.
Yes.
You know how we do. Thank you so much. I mean, you already know the whole deal. I have no final questions.
Right. And again, family, don't forget to like, share, subscribe to this platform, Grand Rising Collective Podcast. You know, this is a new episode for us, and we always have people on with caliber, such as Ms. Blakely and others we've interviewed, and people we'll interview as well in the future. So please push the suggestions, comments, like, share, subscribe here online, on Facebook, on YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn, as she mentioned earlier. Right, we're on all these platforms, so there's no excuse. Right, when we talk about networking, right? You know, we're a resource, you know, but again, we don't promote anybody that's not about it. So again, we try to make sure that we bring quality to you all, and we got to make sure that quality continues in our community.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I want to share, young people who are watching this, you got a lot of gems right here. Ms. Blakely just dropped. Man, just look at the video again, because there's really nothing to a large extent that I can add. She dropped it, man, in regards to doing your research, tangibles, the online resources. And now I'm not even going to take up any more time. Professor Blakely, Ms. Blakely, please share with us as much as you can the resources that you were sharing and talking about for those who are viewing this, and we'll also add it in the descriptions as well. So
yes,
your platform, please give us your last words that you would like for the people who are watching to know, and whatever else you would like to share before we conclude this discussion. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my last few words are: life is full of bumps in the road, but just do it.
Okay.
Straight to it, family.
It is fantastic. All right.
I like to keep it simple.
Peace.